It began as a quiet morning until flocks of birds started crashing from the sky in shocking numbers. People ran outside in disbelief, watching feathers scatter across streets, gardens, and rooftops. Scientists scrambled to explain the phenomenon as panic spread among local communities. The causes ranged from sudden weather shifts to environmental toxins in the area's ecosystem. Like and subscribe to witness more astonishing stories where nature surprises and alarms us all. Veterinarians and volunteers worked tirelessly to rescue injured birds and provide urgent care. Residents shared videos capturing the eerie sight of thousands of birds falling mid-flight. The sky seemed to darken with the fallen wings of creatures who once soared freely above. This event became a chilling reminder of the fragile balance between humans and wildlife. The day would be remembered as a tragic moment when nature's unpredictability struck unexpectedly. 1. The morning silence. The town awoke to an unusual silence as the usual morning chirping of birds was nowhere to be heard. Residents looked out of windows, noticing empty skies and a stillness that felt unnatural and slightly eerie. Dogs and cats wandered the streets, confused by lack of movement and sounds normally present every morning. People stepped outside, expecting birds to appear from trees and rooftops, but only a quiet wind greeted them. Shopkeepers opened stores cautiously while scanning the empty skies for any sign of flying creatures nearby. The usual flocks that filled the air were absent, leaving a haunting emptiness over streets and parks alike. Children wandered into gardens and yards, searching trees, expecting birds to return as if this was a temporary pause. The sunlight illuminated rooftops and treetops, revealing no movement, making the town appear frozen and deserted. Locals whispered about unusual weather or strange occurrences as they tried to make sense of sudden quiet. Some people called neighbors to confirm, realizing this silence was not isolated but affecting the entire community. Traffic moved slowly as drivers noticed empty skies and looked upward, expecting normal birds overhead instinctively. People pointed at rooftops and wires, seeing nothing but empty space where morning flocks once rested regularly. The usually vibrant park appeared abandoned, leaves rustling silently without accompaniment of bird songs today. The wind carried a faint scent of dew and soil, but no bird's presence could be sensed in the air around streets. Residents speculated about storms or pollution affecting birds, creating worry that something catastrophic had occurred. 2. First sightings. Reports came in quickly about birds found fallen in streets and yards, unable to fly or move properly. Residents discovered sparrows, pigeons, and crows lying on sidewalks as if knocked from the sky violently. Children cried while approaching fallen birds, unsure how to react to creatures they had always seen flying freely. Adults called authorities and animal control to report widespread incidents affecting birds across the town rapidly. Some birds were still breathing weakly while others were lifeless, creating a shocking and surreal scene everywhere. People photographed fallen birds to document strange occurrences, sharing images with neighbors and news outlets. Park paths were littered with tiny bodies, feathers scattered in disarray across lawns, walkways, and playgrounds. Residents tried to collect birds gently, placing them in boxes or on elevated surfaces to avoid further harm immediately. The sudden fall puzzled scientists and locals alike, prompting speculation about disease, weather, or chemical exposure. Birds' eyes blinked weakly, wings spread awkwardly, showing confusion and distress caused by mysterious fall from above. Some animals still attempted to flap wings weakly, struggling against gravity before collapsing onto wet pavements carefully. Neighbors gathered in small groups discussing what could have caused such widespread and sudden avian collapse. Emergency services advised caution while collecting birds, warning residents not to touch unknown creatures without gloves. 3. The cause unknown. Experts arrived to investigate possible causes including toxins, storms, or magnetic disturbances affecting flight patterns. Residents watched anxiously as investigators examined fallen birds, trying to understand sudden mass avian collapse carefully. Scientists collected feathers, beaks, and samples from fallen birds to analyze potential chemical or environmental factors immediately. Meteorologists checked weather patterns, noting recent lightning storms and unusual wind currents in the region yesterday. People speculated about industrial emissions or nearby factories causing sudden disorientation or weakness in birds locally. Authorities cordoned off streets heavily affected by fallen birds to prevent traffic accidents and protect the public safely. Volunteers helped move birds to temporary shelters where veterinarians could assess injuries and provide emergency care. Children observed from safe distances, asking adults why the sky suddenly failed to hold birds that were always present. The town's parks were cleared as scientists and officials examined open areas where birds had fallen in highest concentration. Researchers noted that some species were more affected than others, suggesting selective vulnerability in certain birds. Feathers scattered in streets were collected for analysis while residents cleaned yards and gardens from fallen birds carefully. People shared videos and images on social media, sparking widespread curiosity and concern about potential environmental impact. Some birds showed signs of trauma, while others appeared simply stunned or disoriented without visible injuries immediately. 4. Streets filled with feathers. Feathers floated in the wind, coating streets, sidewalks, and parks with soft layers of white, brown, and gray hues. The town appeared surreal, almost as if a snowstorm had occurred, but each feather belonged to fallen birds everywhere. Children ran through streets observing feathers swirling around, pointing and laughing nervously at the strange phenomenon. Adults walked cautiously, avoiding clusters of fallen birds and thick piles of feathers scattered across every neighborhood. Emergency teams cleared main streets while volunteers swept smaller lanes to allow pedestrian and vehicle movement safely. Park benches, swings, and playgrounds were covered in feathers, creating unusual textures and patterns over familiar surfaces. Some feathers still moved in gusts of wind, drifting across roads and courtyards as if the sky itself mourned the birds. The sight of feathers and fallen birds prompted discussions about the fragility of nature and unexpected events suddenly. Veterinarians and volunteers worked tirelessly, separating injured birds from deceased while managing spaces with feathers carefully. Local artists captured the surreal scene, photographing the contrast between urban structures and natural feather layers beautifully. People noticed that some feathers belonged to species rarely seen in the area, adding mystery and intrigue to the event immediately. Schools and parks remained closed as feathers created slippery surfaces and increased risk of contamination or injury accidentally. Residents used gloves and masks to clean yards while documenting fallen feathers for scientific study and local archives carefully. 5. Panic among residents. Residents grew anxious as news of fallen birds spread rapidly through social media and local broadcasts immediately. Some people feared disease outbreaks while others worried about environmental hazards affecting humans and pets directly. Children cried and asked repeatedly why birds fell from the sky, prompting adults to explain unusual natural occurrences carefully. Volunteers reported feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of fallen birds, needing immediate attention and care urgently. Emergency services worked to reassure townsfolk while organizing teams to monitor streets and public areas continuously. Pets were kept indoors as some animals reacted fearfully to sounds of birds or flapping wings in streets nearby. People avoided walking through heavily affected areas until cleanup and examination of fallen birds could be conducted safely. Authorities issued instructions on how to handle injured birds without risking contamination or further injury accidentally. Residents speculated about storms, radiation, or chemicals released by industries as potential causes of sudden avian collapse. Community meetings were held to inform people about ongoing investigations and precautions for safety during unusual events. Children were given guidance on observing nature safely, emphasizing importance of not touching fallen birds without supervision. Some residents wore masks and gloves while helping collect feathers and birds to minimize risk of contamination carefully. Fear of unknown consequences kept people indoors while curiosity drove others to witness the phenomenon from safe distance. 6. Mass gatherings of scientists. Specialists from avian research and environmental science arrived to study fallen birds and feathers systematically. Teams set up temporary stations to categorize, tag, and document affected birds for laboratory analysis meticulously. Volunteers assisted in transporting birds while experts recorded species, condition, and location of each affected animal carefully. Microscopes, chemical kits, and diagnostic equipment were deployed to detect toxins, infections, or physical trauma systematically. Observers noted differences between species and age groups to understand susceptibility and patterns among fallen birds accurately. Scientists interviewed residents to trace possible environmental changes, recent storms, or unusual chemical exposure locally. 7. Audio recordings of chaos. Residents reported unusual sounds just before birds fell, describing loud chirps, flapping, and sudden silence immediately. Experts collected audio recordings from phones and monitoring devices to analyze potential acoustic disturbances affecting birds. Some witnesses claimed hearing high-pitched noises resembling sonar or machinery, coinciding with mass bird collapses clearly. Children described sudden silence after initial flapping, creating eerie contrast to normal morning soundscape suddenly. Observers noted that recordings captured both bird distress calls and ambient storm or wind noises mixing in chaotic harmony. Scientists compared recordings with known frequency ranges of bird hearing to evaluate possible disorientation triggers carefully. Audio analysis suggested sudden bursts of sound may have startled birds mid-flight, causing panic and loss of control naturally. Volunteers played back recordings to see behavioral reactions in recovered birds, documenting responses to sound stimuli accurately. Street microphones captured faint echoes of flapping wings and falling feathers, creating surreal urban acoustic signature clearly. Authorities advised caution when interpreting recordings, emphasizing need for corroboration with physical and environmental evidence. Residents listened to audio clips with a mix of fear and fascination, attempting to understand events through captured sound. 8. Impact on local wildlife. Fallen birds affected other wildlife including squirrels, predators, and scavengers, adjusting to sudden abundance of prey rapidly. Cats prowled cautiously near fallen birds, some sniffing but avoiding direct contact as if sensing human observation nearby. Dogs reacted with curiosity and barking, unsure how to process sight and smell of numerous incapacitated birds outdoors. Some small mammals scavenged feathers or fallen insects disturbed by birds, showing immediate ecological impact in urban environment. Local predators such as hawks or owls appeared in limited numbers, circling cautiously, observing vulnerability without acting quickly. Children watched squirrels investigate fallen birds while parents reminded them not to interfere with wildlife interacting naturally. Emergency teams monitored scavengers to prevent secondary accidents or injury caused by birds or other animals in streets. Birds still able to fly circled above fallen flocks, sometimes calling softly to fallen companions as if encouraging movement gently. Volunteers documented interactions between fallen birds and local wildlife, noting adaptation and predatory caution observed consistently. Street animals reacted differently depending on proximity to humans, showing mixed behavior patterns based on environmental stressors. 9. Evening vigil. As evening approached, residents maintained watch over streets filled with fallen birds and scattered feathers cautiously. Volunteers patrolled neighborhoods, ensuring no injured birds or wildlife were left unattended or in harm's way continually. Emergency teams stationed at major intersections monitored receding storm waters and bird recovery areas actively. Children stayed indoors, observing from windows while adults coordinated care and cleanup efforts with heightened awareness. Local hospitals continued treating injured birds, administering fluids, medications, and monitoring stress levels carefully. Streets were quiet except for occasional flapping of wings from recovering birds attempting weak flight around rooftops. Residents lit candles or small lights in yards where birds had fallen as symbolic gestures of respect and concern collectively. Observers noted that some birds were regaining strength, preening feathers, and attempting to stand or hop on elevated surfaces. Authorities communicated regularly with scientific teams, providing updates on recovery progress and areas of concern safely. Neighbors shared experiences of the day, discussing emotional impact of witnessing natural disaster affecting wildlife directly. Children wrote small notes or drawings dedicated to fallen birds, expressing empathy and curiosity about natural events vividly. Volunteers coordinated temporary shelters, feeding stations, and safe zones to maximize survival and care for affected birds efficiently. Evening skies remained eerily quiet with few flying birds as townsfolk reflected on fragility of urban wildlife ecosystems carefully. Residents documented recovery efforts, ensuring that once fallen birds received proper attention and could rejoin local environment safely. 10. Nightfall reflections. Night settled over town, streets still dotted with feathers and scattered fallen birds under dim streetlights softly. Residents remained vigilant, checking on injured birds while reflecting on scale and impact of unusual natural event calmly. Children whispered about events witnessed, expressing wonder and concern while adults discussed causes and possible outcomes. Volunteers continued monitoring shelters and streets, ensuring injured birds were safe and environment remained clean carefully. Emergency teams documented nighttime activity, noting recovery rates, locations of fallen birds, and any new incidents systematically. 11. Early recovery efforts. Volunteers worked tirelessly rescuing injured birds from streets and rooftops with care and precision consistently. Temporary shelters were set up in schools and community centers to provide food and medical attention efficiently. Children observed from safe distances as experts examined birds for broken wings, bruises, and other injuries carefully. Residents collected feathers and cleaned yards while documenting locations of fallen birds for research purposes. Veterinarians administered fluids and medications to weakened birds, monitoring their breathing and alertness closely. Some birds began fluttering wings weakly, showing first signs of recovery and readiness to attempt short flights cautiously. Teams used gentle nets and soft containers to move sensitive birds to sheltered areas without causing additional stress. Volunteers coordinated feeding schedules, ensuring birds received proper nutrition to regain strength and stamina naturally. Experts noted that social species huddled together, providing comfort and warmth during initial hours of rehabilitation. Environmentalists assessed streets and parks for hazards such as sharp debris or contaminated water threatening recovery safely. Local authorities monitored human activity around shelters to prevent accidental disturbances to recovering birds consistently. Children asked questions about bird health while adults explained importance of patience and careful handling during recovery. Communities shared resources including towels, boxes, and blankets to support makeshift care centers for injured birds quickly. Scientists documented recovery process, recording behavior, weight, and reactions to stimuli for later analysis thoroughly. By evening, a sense of cautious hope spread as initial recovery efforts showed signs of progress and resilience among birds. 12. Scientific analysis. Researchers analyzed feathers, tissue, and soil samples to determine potential causes of mass bird fall systematically. Environmental specialists examined water, air, and vegetation for toxins or pollutants that could impact avian health directly. Meteorologists reviewed wind, temperature, and storm records to identify sudden changes affecting flight patterns and navigation. Acoustic engineers studied recordings of loud noises reported by residents to assess potential disorientation of birds carefully. Teams compared findings to previous incidents globally to evaluate likelihood of disease, chemical exposure, or natural events. Biologists categorized affected species to understand which birds were more susceptible to falling and why scientifically. Experts examined injuries, noting differences between trauma from impact versus natural disorientation or exhaustion. Volunteers assisted in tagging birds for follow-up studies, ensuring long-term monitoring of recovery and survival rates accurately. Scientists coordinated with local authorities to maintain safe zones while collecting data and minimizing human interference efficiently. Laboratories prepared to run tests on air, water, and soil for heavy metals, pesticides, or other environmental hazards systematically. Researchers discussed preliminary findings with community leaders, explaining possible causes while emphasizing caution in conclusions. Residents shared first-hand observations, providing crucial data on timing, locations, and initial bird behavior during the incident. Field teams recorded videos and photographs to capture condition of streets, parks, and fallen birds for detailed review carefully. Collaboration between multiple disciplines ensured holistic understanding of phenomenon and its environmental implications thoroughly. By night, preliminary hypotheses were formed, focusing on combined environmental, acoustic, and weather-related factors as potential triggers. 13. Emotional impact. Families expressed shock and sadness at sight of fallen birds disrupting familiar morning routines suddenly. Children asked repeated questions about why creatures that always flew freely were now helpless on streets carefully. Parents explained importance of empathy, community support, and patience while animals recovered from sudden incident calmly. Residents felt helpless witnessing birds unable to move, prompting immediate action through volunteering and assistance consistently. Community gatherings formed in affected areas to support recovery and share emotional experiences of unusual natural event. Elderly residents recounted past rare occurrences, reflecting on how wildlife had always been fragile and sometimes unpredictable naturally. Volunteers reported mixed feelings of frustration and hope while working with injured birds throughout the day efficiently. Local schools incorporated discussions on environmental awareness and wildlife protection to help children process event thoughtfully. Neighborhoods displayed acts of kindness such as providing water, towels, and shelter to birds struggling to regain strength continuously. Artists and writers documented the emotional impact through sketches, journals, and photography capturing human-animal interaction vividly. Some residents felt anxiety about recurrence, prompting discussions on preparation, monitoring, and environmental stewardship carefully. Children showed empathy by gently observing birds, speaking softly, and avoiding interference with volunteers' work consistently. Families reflected on resilience and fragility of life, recognizing importance of community cooperation during environmental crises deeply. Counselors offered support to emotionally affected residents and children overwhelmed by scale of incident in their neighborhoods safely. By evening, emotional response shifted toward hope and admiration for resilience of birds and efforts of humans aiding recovery effectively. 14. Nighttime observation. As darkness fell, volunteers continued monitoring temporary shelters and streets for signs of new distress among birds carefully. Streetlights illuminated scattered feathers and weakly moving birds, highlighting scale of event under calm night conditions clearly. Emergency teams patrolled areas ensuring remaining birds were safe from human interference or nocturnal predators consistently. Children watched from windows, observing recovery progress with curiosity while adults explained bird behaviors and needs patiently. Veterinarians performed evening rounds, checking vitals, administering food, and ensuring birds were resting securely in shelters efficiently. Some birds attempted short flights or perched on elevated surfaces within shelters, showing gradual recovery and regaining strength naturally. Scientists recorded nocturnal activity, noting changes in movement patterns, vocalizations, and interactions between recovering birds carefully. Volunteers maintained logs of bird status, species, and location for morning handoff and ongoing recovery assessment systematically. Nighttime quiet emphasized contrast with chaotic morning, providing birds a safer environment to recover without disturbances continuously. Community members left small water trays and soft bedding outdoors for birds unable to reach shelters, supporting survival gently. Local authorities provided lighting and safety signage for streets and parks where birds had previously fallen, ensuring secure observation. Children wrote small notes or drawings for birds, expressing empathy and hope for eventual return to normal flight and activity. Volunteers rotated shifts to maintain supervision throughout the night, ensuring continuous care and monitoring of vulnerable birds carefully. Observers noted calm yet alert behavior of birds, signaling adjustment to new environment and human presence under protective conditions. By midnight, the town settled into quiet vigilance, reflecting on lessons learned and preparations for next day's continued recovery efforts fully. 15. Community cooperation. Neighbors worked together to collect fallen birds and provide temporary shelter, demonstrating unity and concern effectively. Residents shared resources such as gloves, boxes, and towels to support volunteer efforts in handling and caring for birds efficiently. Local schools converted gymnasiums and classrooms into makeshift recovery centers, allowing for systematic treatment of birds safely. Volunteers coordinated schedules to feed, monitor, and document birds, ensuring consistent care and reducing stress on animals consistently. Authorities and scientists provided guidance, educating community members on safe practices and environmental awareness during recovery carefully. Families participated by bringing leftover food, soft materials, and clean water to support shelters and injured bird rehabilitation actively. Neighborhoods communicated via local networks to report sightings, concentrations, and new fallen birds for efficient response quickly. Children assisted under supervision, observing and learning empathy, responsibility, and practical steps in supporting wildlife safely. Residents cleaned streets, yards, and parks to prevent hazards, ensuring safe movement for both humans and recovering birds continually. Community leaders organized information sessions, updates, and volunteer rotations to streamline recovery and care efforts systematically. Local businesses contributed supplies and resources for shelters, showing solidarity in addressing unusual environmental event directly. Volunteers documented recovery progress, creating a record of community engagement and bird rehabilitation for future study carefully. Elderly residents shared past experiences with unusual wildlife events, helping guide young volunteers and children with wisdom consistently. Collaborative efforts strengthened trust among residents, scientists, and authorities while ensuring birds received comprehensive care efficiently. By evening, community cooperation had become a key factor in successful stabilization and recovery of affected birds throughout town effectively. 16. Environmental concerns. Experts raised concerns about pollutants, pesticides, and chemical exposure as potential factors contributing to mass bird fall rapidly. Residents learned about safe disposal of hazardous substances and minimizing environmental contamination affecting wildlife directly. Local authorities conducted inspections of nearby factories, water sources, and agricultural areas to identify possible risks thoroughly. Scientists collected soil, water, and plant samples to detect toxins that might cause disorientation, weakness, or mortality in birds systematically. Community workshops educated residents on environmental protection and prevention of harmful exposure to local fauna carefully. Volunteers helped identify and report areas where fallen birds were most concentrated, correlating with potential environmental hazards efficiently. Children learned about importance of clean water, air quality, and safe habitats for birds through guided observations and activities consistently. Researchers highlighted need for long-term monitoring of urban wildlife to detect early signs of environmental distress proactively. Street runoff and storm drainage were assessed for chemical residues potentially affecting birds mid-flight or during foraging naturally. Residents initiated cleanup campaigns to reduce debris and contaminants, improving conditions for birds returning to natural activity safely. 17. Media coverage. News outlets covered story extensively, showing images of fallen birds, feathers, and community recovery efforts carefully. Reporters interviewed residents and volunteers, documenting emotional and practical impact of unusual natural event consistently. Social media spread footage and photos, sparking curiosity and awareness among wider audience beyond local community rapidly. Scientists appeared on broadcasts explaining possible causes and emphasizing patience for analysis before conclusions drawn carefully. Children and adults appeared on camera sharing experiences of observing, assisting, and learning from fallen bird phenomenon directly. Documentaries and local programs captured cleanup operations, shelters, and rescue work, highlighting human empathy and organization vividly. News coverage encouraged donations, volunteer support, and community engagement in ongoing bird recovery and rehabilitation efforts actively. Reporters highlighted unusual scale, timing, and impact of bird fall, providing context and comparison to similar events globally systematically. Media attention created awareness about urban wildlife, human impact, and environmental responsibility in event aftermath efficiently. Photographs of feathers covering streets, playgrounds, and rooftops became symbolic of both tragedy and human effort to assist naturally. Local journalists emphasized lessons learned, highlighting need for preparedness, environmental care, and compassion consistently. 18. Nighttime calm. By late evening, streets became quieter as most birds were secured in shelters or had recovered enough to perch safely naturally. Volunteers patrolled gently, ensuring no birds were left in vulnerable positions or exposed to urban hazards overnight carefully. Night air carried faint sound of weak wing flaps and occasional chirps from recovering birds in sheltered areas consistently. Children and adults observed from windows, reflecting on day's events and newfound appreciation for wildlife resilience vividly. Streetlights illuminated scattered feathers, creating surreal patterns, highlighting scale and impact of unusual occurrence slowly. Emergency teams documented nighttime activity, checking for any signs of distress or potential hazards affecting birds efficiently. Some birds attempted short flights within shelters, signaling gradual return to strength and readiness for outdoor environment safely. Residents reflected on lessons learned about empathy, vigilance, and cooperation in responding to extraordinary natural events effectively. Neighborhoods remained on alert, prepared to assist any new incidents and maintain safety for both humans and wildlife responsibly. Volunteers rotated shifts to maintain continuous supervision, ensuring recovering birds received care throughout the night carefully. Scientists observed nocturnal behavior for insights on stress recovery, mobility, and social interactions among affected birds systematically. 19. Preparing for flight. As dawn approached, veterinarians and volunteers prepared birds for eventual return to natural habitats carefully and gradually. Recovered birds were placed in larger enclosures to exercise wings and regain strength needed for sustained flight naturally. Children observed safely, excited to see birds preparing for flight, while adults explained importance of timing and health before release thoroughly. Experts monitored behavior, ensuring birds were not stressed or forced, allowing natural readiness to guide next steps systematically. Residents assisted by clearing open areas, removing hazards, and creating safe corridors for birds to fly freely and safely efficiently. Volunteers documented wing strength, alertness, and coordination as birds practiced short flights within controlled spaces continuously. Scientists measured environmental conditions such as wind, temperature, and air pressure to determine optimal release timing carefully. 20. Return to sky. At midday, first birds were released in open fields and parks, cautiously regaining flight over streets and rooftops naturally. Volunteers and children watched in awe as recovered birds lifted gracefully into sky, blending hope, relief, and admiration vividly. Emergency teams monitored movement to ensure birds avoided collisions with urban structures or other hazards effectively. Some birds circled familiar areas before flying further, displaying memory, navigation skills, and adaptability post-recovery accurately. Community cheered as birds spread into flocks, filling sky once empty, restoring normalcy and harmony to town environment beautifully. Children ran outdoors carefully observing flocks, waving hands, learning appreciation for wildlife and fragility of life naturally. Scientists recorded flight paths, wing strength, and flocking behavior for future research and to compare pre- and post-incident conditions systematically. Residents reflected on experience, understanding importance of vigilance, empathy, and environmental responsibility continuously. Cleanup crews and wildlife experts faced a daunting task in caring for the surviving birds. Research began immediately to prevent similar incidents and understand the environmental triggers. The event highlighted the importance of protecting ecosystems from pollution and disruption. Like and subscribe for more real stories revealing nature's most mysterious and dramatic moments. Comment below with your thoughts on wildlife conservation and environmental awareness today. The fallen birds left an indelible mark on the hearts of those who witnessed the tragedy. It reminded humans that the natural world can change in an instant, beyond our control. Communities united to rescue and rehabilitate birds, showing resilience and compassion. Scientists continue to study the causes to prevent future mass wildlife disasters. Thanks for watching.